Good evening, Kevin.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
You're still on mute. Oh, no, there I got you now.
Yeah, everything going well?
There we go. Okay. Let me let a couple other people in for starters. And we're still a little bit early. We usually get rolling about 7:02, so we'll give it a couple minutes here while people join in.
Scott, were you able to watch the debate today?
I've got 3 devices, and all of a sudden they're dinging at me. Oh, 4, the watch just went. When it alerts one, it alerts them all. Jeez. Okay. Where are we at here?
Yeah, it was an interesting day in the Senate, wasn't it?
I didn't really catch what happened at the end. I mean, it's just kind of like they were debating it and then it was over.
Yeah, they called a halt for the day, covered down on a little other additional business. But I didn't hear when they're kicking out again.
Yeah, they definitely didn't say anything. I'm assuming it would be tomorrow.
I assume you're right.
Welcome, everyone. See a lot of people joining.
I actually tried to look it up on the schedule on the calendar, and it doesn't. I didn't see anything for continuing discussion tomorrow, so I don't know.
No, while we're waiting, might as well chit chat a little bit, show of hands or whatever. Who got to listen to any of the Senate hearing today on this 150?
I listened to pretty much the whole thing.
Hand going up, dancing. I like it. Yes, I was having trouble today. I've been speed testing my internet, and we pay for what they call gig speeds. You're supposed to get like 1,000 megabytes a second or whatever it is. Or I think actually, talking to the tech today, I think they guaranteed like 85%-ish or in that range in a 24-hour period. And I've been like clocking download speeds at 8.8. I've had a 0. I couldn't believe it gave me a 0. Usually I just want to connect. A lot of them in the 30s, 40s. Finally, they're up to about 180 this evening. Apparently, I finally, after a couple of weeks, got the attention of my internet cable service, and they went trolling through the neighborhood and went, oh, geez, this whole street's kind of screwed up. And the main block down there at the end, that's got an issue. And so I was crossing my fingers that would be on tonight, but it kept cutting out on me initially during the first portion of the hearings. And probably about 2 or so hours into it, I was finally able to like kind of listen to it without hanging and cutting out and stuff like that. So we did finally get to hear some of it. And of course, as those things are, they take so long. It's hard to sit and listen to every bit. So I did miss some others. Of course, while the cable guy was here, I missed an hour or something like that. So I'll probably have to go back and revisit it. Matter of fact, I just shared, and I might as well share it with y'all while I'm thinking about it.
I think they were having a problem airing it because it was
In
buffering
here's the
a lot
link
in the beginning.
for the video archives. And then you'll just see the Wednesday, January 26th, 1 p.m. Senate is kind of what it says. You can view it there. There's a little icon over to the right of that, a little eye information icon. that'll let you know that it takes them about 24 hours to get a downloadable version. I've gone ahead a couple times on these hearings and gone ahead and downloaded them and then uploaded them to our YouTube channel. And that way I can embed them onto our website and stuff like that for people to view on our website, or, you know, that kind of thing. But it's a long hearing. It was started at 1. I think they started actually letting Tom talk around 2. And he went on till, I'm going to say roughly 4:30, till they did a motion to carry over. And the question I'm seeing from everybody on Facebook is, carry over to when? I don't know. I'm hoping it's still tomorrow, because they will reconvene tomorrow at 1 o'clock. That's my assumption, especially with Tom saying, I don't want anything else to move until this, you know, gets its chance. And I don't think he's done. I thought he did a really good job. Oh, shit, we passed the 7:02. We'll talk about that more in a couple of minutes. We are at 7:03 actually, so I guess it's time to kind of get rolling here. I want to first start by welcoming everybody to our cannabis conversation. Of course, all of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness and are not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. So again, welcome to everybody who's here on me with the Zoom call. Welcome to anybody who might be watching this live on our YouTube channel. And also welcome to anybody who might be watching it as a recording later on. While I'm mentioning YouTube, I do like to point out that during the conversation, we do not monitor the comment section down below off to the side, wherever it might be on your device. But after YouTube is done rendering, usually about 24 hours, we'll go back, we'll visit, and we will try and address your questions, comments, and or concerns. All right. So where are we again? My name is Scott Weldon. I am the Executive Director of the South Carolina chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And you are on the South Carolina NORML Cannabis Conversation, which we do every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Tonight's topic was one we've been looking forward to talking with our special guest tonight, Kevin Caldwell. Kevin's from Louisiana, and I'm not going to try and give a bio. As a matter of fact, I'll wait a moment and I'll ask him to give us a little bit of background on him. But Kevin has been instrumental in moving decriminalization forward in Louisiana and was recently announced as manager of the southeastern area of the United States for MPP. He's going to be talking to us a little bit tonight about his activities prior to MPP and what he's done to help move decriminalization in Louisiana forward, almost in South Carolina. So with that, I'm going to kind of turn my mic off for the moment and ask Kevin to take over.
Hey, Scott, thanks. It's great to be here. Y'all can hear me, right?
Okay, I'm not hearing you. Let me see what I got going on in my, oh, I know what it is. It's my controls, preferences. I probably have to change my speaker audio. All right, let me try that again. Kevin, say hello.
Hey, can everybody hear
I
me?
gotcha. All right.
Fantastic. Scott, thanks. Hello to everybody from South Carolina NORML. I'm Kevin Caldwell. I'm excited to be with y'all. I'd like to share some of my experiences and tips and tidbits that worked in the Deep South on cannabis reform. My background is widely varied. I have served in public service for the city of New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina for 5 years. I worked as an intelligence analyst for a counterterrorism training program. I was the only civilian on that team for many years. It was contract work. It wasn't something that I did full time. I taught the history and evolution of terrorism, things of that nature. We analyzed specific events and tried to train law enforcement on that. When I left public service with the city of New Orleans, I was kind of at one of those points in life where you wonder, where is the next, where am I going next? And it wasn't long after that my wife developed breast cancer. And I really all of a sudden started studying, and luckily with some good friends from out west, really started educating me on cannabis as medicine. And I became very frustrated when I found out that, for example, that, you know, when we were very forthcoming with our doctors during that process, and even though the doctors could not approve under state law of what we were doing, we wanted to make sure that they knew, you know, what our course of action was. That kind of frustrated me, and I got into organized cannabis reform. I formed a grassroots organization in New Orleans called Common Sense NOLA, and started on my journeys going to and from Baton Rouge, our state capital, and went and pretty early on got involved with the cannabis reform movement at the Capitol. The first time that I went up there, I went up in my suit, and I had all these presentations, and I brought data in to talk about what a regulated adult use marketplace would look like in Louisiana. Found out later that really even though they had said that the meeting was about just cannabis in general, it was really focused more on medical. I was lucky I had a long-serving lobbyist who'd been working on hemp and cannabis reform for many years, kind of took me under his wing. I think the very fact that I showed up at the Capitol in a suit and that I spoke succinctly, really, you know, because the allies that we had at that point maybe weren't necessarily always putting forth their best foot forward. And I mean, I think, you know, we always referred to the House in Louisiana as the people's house, but, you know, nonetheless, to be taken seriously, and I'm sure it's no different in Columbia or any of the other capitals, is you really have to dress for success. If you don't have that uniform, you know, a tie or professional attire, to not be sexist, because obviously activists come in all shapes and sizes and genders, but we began a road, and we started working very early on trying to get a medical program going, and we fought really hard in 2014, 2015 to get a medical cannabis bill passed. I was very flustered in 2014. We had a very good decriminalization bill at that point in there, and it was brutally shot down. And my level of frustration with the same opponents that I'm sure every activist is familiar with in Louisiana. It was specifically the District Attorneys Association, the Sheriff's Association. They wield an incredible amount of power in Louisiana. And I really didn't know what to do at that point. And so I sat back, re-strategized, and I started working on trying to see what we could do on changing possession laws here in the city of New Orleans. And I started with I had a relationship with my city council person. We had served together on a neighborhood board after Katrina, and she eventually moved on to becoming a city council person. So I engaged with her. She put me in charge with another great council person, Susan Guidry, who was in charge of the Criminal Justice Committee. And we started by, I sat down and told her what we wanted to do, what the reasoning behind it was. and she was on board with it. But the first thing that we asked is, and let me preface that by saying that in 2011, the city adopted its first cannabis ordinance, which stated that if you were a first-time offender and you had less than 14 grams of flower on you, you could be written a summons, municipal summons. So I requested data from what did the arrest rates look like in the years going up to that ordinance, and then in the years going the 3 years after that. I think it's key so often. And you know what? I may be even getting ahead of myself, Scott, because I just keep talking. You asked for my background, but so that is my background, and but I'll let you ask some questions. I'm sorry. Sometimes I'm rather verbose.
Oh, I like to think of myself as a good listener. So I was just kind of taking notes and thinking of some of this myself, because yes, as we've spoken before, I think that's really the approach that we need to take here in South Carolina, is to go municipally and start trying to get decrim ordinances city by city, town by town, before the legislators at the state level will acknowledge it. Although there are decrim bills in our legislature, I just don't think they'll ever move until we sort of force the issue at the municipal level.
Well, I think one of the key things, Scott, when you're doing that is, like I was saying, is start by building relationships with your council people, with your state reps. Ask to meet with them. And build a relationship. Don't let the stereotypes of what they may have of the cannabis community be what break those perceptions. Sit down and talk to them, and bring data, request data. And of course, you can always make freedom of information requests. But what I found in New Orleans was, by building relationships with my council people, they could then make the requests and get the data a whole lot quicker. And we were lucky enough to have data analysts on the council, so they were able to then be able to break that down. What is the racial makeup of arrests for cannabis? Do we see it increasing over time or decreasing? And I know in previous conversations, and Scott and I started talking, what was it? I guess early in the summer this year, that kind of data helps bring elected officials on board to what you're talking about. And when I was, as we progressed towards 2016, when we actually finally got a decriminalization ordinance passed here, and once again, that's in the city of New Orleans, not in the state of Louisiana. That didn't happen until last year. But all of a sudden, people that maybe don't think that they have a dog in this fight, or they're maybe a little bit suspicious of wanting to get involved. And I'll give you an example. What we saw was that roughly 86% of the people that were being arrested for cannabis possession in New Orleans were young African-American men. When, if y'all aren't familiar with our city, cannabis has a long tradition in New Orleans, going back to the jazz era, well over 100 years ago, and recognizing the fact that obviously, when you're out and about around town, it's not just 86% of the people using cannabis are young African-American men. And then at that point, you can kind of pivot the conversation, not to whether or not it's a right or whatever your personally held beliefs on this are. Then we start talking about this is a civil rights issue. When laws are being unequitably enforced, is that a just law? And if it's not a just law, what can we do to either change that law or limit the damages that law creates in our community? And we saw, for example, that using a baseline that a cannabis arrest takes an officer off the streets for 5 hours. What we saw was that the New Orleans Police Department was wasting 15 to 20,000 manpower hours a year on enforcing cannabis prohibition. And this was in a city where, violent crime has always been an issue. A vast majority of the citizens, no matter what they felt about cannabis, wanted to see officers on the streets more looking for violent criminals and not just looking for that low-hanging fruit that a cannabis arrest can be. And it's funny because when you're working with elected officials so often, you have to change your messaging as to what they are comfortable with. For example, once again, I'll go back. I had already started hosting a weekly radio show on a radio station that was cannabis centric, which I did for 7 years just until about 8 weeks ago. And when I took my new job, I kind of had to walk away from that and focus on my new work for a while. And I'm glad, because I do work usually pretty much 10 to 12-hour days right now during session. But so we were already bringing that conversation out into the community. And for example, the councilwoman that I was working with, she wanted to judge the support that she had in the community. So they had a poll done, and it ended up that 32.5% of the people who responded to the poll admitted to using cannabis. And that's something that, then you could that's when I looked at her and said, you're not risking political capital here. You're actually gaining political capital. But as we moved closer and closer, she asked me to stop using the word decriminalization. She felt very uncomfortable with that. It was causing negative feedback within the community. So I just started saying, okay, making cannabis penalties in line with the values of the community. She was very, very happy with that. But sometimes we have to remember that it's the elected officials that actually pass these laws. And when somebody makes a request to you, if you want to continue to work with them, it's usually a pretty good idea to follow their lead. And if they want you to change the way that you verbalize something, excuse me. Been talking all day. And that is just water, y'all. Even though I don't have a nice glass mason jar like you do. But as you start to build allies, then all of a sudden it's really interesting. They'll bring you in on other things. And for example, I had several council people that would bring me into other criminal justice reform measures that maybe just kind of peripherally affected the cannabis community, but nonetheless, it really made me feel part of their team. And as we moved forward, and when we finally passed the original ordinance the original ordinance in 2016, it was we brought it down to the fact that a first-time offender got a $40 fine, a second-time offender got $60, third-time offender got $80, and any subsequent offenses after that, you'd have a $100 fine. Under a policy put forward by the mayor and adopted by the chief of police, because of the way that cannabis weights are done in under Louisiana law, simple possession is 0 to 14 grams. Felony possession was 14 grams to 2.5 pounds. So we made the ordinance, or the ordinance did not, the policy adopted was to just write municipal summonses for anything up to 2.5 pounds that was not set up for distribution. It also went a little further than state law and recognized all forms of cannabis, whether it be topicals, tinctures, concentrates, hashish, that they all qualified under the ordinance. And we saw after that adoption, we saw a huge drop. I think it was the numbers and I'm a little rusty on these, but I think we were averaging about 2,500 arrests a year for cannabis possession, to under about 100 and 150 to 200. And we were, and I recognize the fact that sometimes a law officer may arrest somebody on a cannabis charge for something that really has nothing to do with the cannabis. And I reached out to a lot of the law enforcement officers that I used to teach with, and they came back and said, yeah, you know, if we know we got a guy that we're trying to get on a murder charge, and the only thing that we have to hold him for 24 hours is, yeah, we may use a cannabis charge. And I was copacetic with that, but also our allies on the council knew that every year, starting about mid-February, I would start making my requests for what are the new arrest, what's the new data for this year. And so it's always very important to follow up and let those elected officials know that, hey, yes, we appreciate you getting this bill passed, but we're going to keep your feet to the fire, and we want to look at data. I just can't stress data enough, because so often within the cannabis community, we have so many people who are so passionate on this topic. But there's a time for strategy, and there's a time for passion. And I think it's important to maintain focus on your eyes on the prize, and also recognizing that no state, or at least no state legislatively, has jumped right into adult use. I mean, it's a pretty set formula, is that you get a medical program off the ground. From there, you start really pushing for decriminalization, and then eventually adult use comes about. And I mean, we've certainly seen that happen here in Louisiana. After New Orleans, I worked with the Baton Rouge City Council, and then they adopted a decriminalization, and then 2 years ago, the city of Shreveport did. And then at that point, once we had the three major cities in the state doing it, the state adopted what I call decrim light bill last year. In other words, they took jail off the table. The maximum fine is $100, but it's still a criminal charge. And obviously, to me, the ultimate way to look at decriminalization is it's just a civil fine. So I'm looking at the chats. Hey, Mike, I feel you on that. I think it's important to do this, to take a multifaceted approach to this. And I said working with legislators, but at the same time building a good face in the community. For example, maybe have a day of service, and you go out, you send out a media release. Hey, the members of South Carolina NORML are going to be cleaning, this park on Saturday. And you get out there, and the media comes out. They see you working in the community, bettering the community, once again, lowering stereotypes. I know, and thank you. You posted a couple articles that I'd written for some New Orleans magazines. I saw that. And so, I just started writing op-eds. And I think you'll find that especially the smaller magazines, the online magazines, they like cannabis articles because they get a lot of clicks. And, take a, if you feel like it, look at some of the stuff that I've written in the past. And then, of course, I was able to get on a public radio station and start a weekly show. That always helps. For a long time, we were broadcasting them via Facebook every week as well. And, during session, we would easily get between 600 and 900 people a week watching the show. So, a lot like what you're doing here, But just it's always considering. I mean, usually you'll find most of your public radio stations, and I'm sure there's one in the Charleston area. You're going to find people that are rather open-minded, at least to this topic. And if you can put forward a show and bring in guests, I think that's an important step. It really does take patience. I know to so many of the people that I've worked with over the years, it was all my favorite. And I know they got tired of me saying this. It was like, man, this is not a 50-yard sprint. This is a full-on marathon, and you have to be willing to, you don't just start by running a marathon, you train for it. But at the same time, you have to accept the fact that you're going to make these incremental steps. And if not, you're going to burn out and get tired or disgusted, because a lot of times it's really easy to be to get down in the dumps that you're not making the progress that you want. And why is it that legislators won't see the world in the same paradigm that you do? But I've certainly watched the evolution of legislators in Louisiana, which is just which is just amazing. I mean, we had a legislator who served on the Health and Welfare Committee, and he would come up to me at lobby day every year, and I'd offer him polling from his data. We always had all sorts of information on the table, and I'll give him credit. He would always come talk to us, and he'd always say, well, you don't have my vote. You probably never will. And I was just, okay, sir, I recognize that, but just kept smiling and saying, well, we'll see you in committee hearing. And finally, we had when we had a bill that was really going to bring a medical program on board, I asked him, I said, sir, just because you vote for something in committee does not mean that you have to vote for it on the floor. This is an important topic that could really improve the quality of life for thousands of Louisianians. So I think it deserves a floor vote. And he looked at me and said, well, I'll consider that. And the next week he voted for it in committee. The following week he voted for it against in the House. And I respect that he had that moral stand, but he got it to the House, got it to the floor. It was a deciding vote. I think it was a 6-7 vote, and a tie, of course, does not move forward. Just to let you know, 2 years ago, that same legislator sponsored legislation that would allow any doctor to recommend cannabis for any debilitating condition. So the fact is politicians often, in my experience, do not turn on a dime, but you can, by working with them over time, really get them to evolve on this subject, on any subject. I mean, I think any advice that I'm putting forward off of my experience here would be true for any activist looking for change where they come from. So I would like to give you some chance to ask me some questions, because I realize that I've been sitting here talking for half an hour.
And I appreciate that. But as you were telling that story about that particular legislator, kind of just a recent experience for me. It's one of those things where, you've got to talk to people that may not always say yes to you. I recently was able to reach out to the ACLU of South Carolina to see if they'd want to speak for us at our upcoming press conference. And while I was talking with them, one of their staff there suggested maybe I contact this particular chief of police of one of the South Carolina towns because he was pro decriminalization. And to me, it was sort of counterintuitive. Do I really want to be calling the police about marijuana? But if he's going to be potentially speak positively, I have no choice but to call. And of course, going to the website, there was no way to email or do it without actually picking up the phone and calling. So I did, and got somebody on his staff and left my message on what I was looking for, someone to speak positively about decriminalization, the need for decriminalization in the state at the State House. And the person said they'll pass the message on to the chief of police, and he's got your name, he's got your number. And I finished the call. I'm like, okay, now what? And I did get a call then finally the next day. I want to say late the next afternoon. And unfortunately, he didn't think it was appropriate for him in his office to speak out in that particular manner. But maybe some other time down the road, he may, be able to speak or something like that.
Well, Scott, when you're looking for allies like that, there's organizations like LEAP. I don't know if you're familiar with them, the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I know that they do have some speakers in South Carolina. I believe it's just 2.
I do have a tentative confirmation from a LEAP member. He said, of course, call and confirm, contact and confirm about a week out, but he anticipates being available. So we do have that representation from law enforcement, and I think I just got a confirmation today from a criminal defense attorney who actually won a pretty big monetary case in Myrtle Beach for over $100 of marijuana. Basically, the police came in, no knocked, shot him multiple times, and left him paralyzed from the waist. I think paraplegic. And the taxpayer ended up paying out about $11.5 million to the guy.
That's a horrific story. I'm familiar with it.
Okay, yeah. Well, his attorney Johnny McCoy just contacted me today. He's trying to work it into his schedule to get here, get with us on February 9th. And originally he said no because he was going to be out of town, but he reached back out today. So I didn't mean to mention names offhand. I'm trying to keep names quiet until I'm actually ready to do the press release for this.
Sure, of course.
And make sure I have those confirmations. But we do have some good ones, and we've got again, without mentioning names, a candidate for governor here in the state that will come out and speak for us. We have a couple of vets. We have some hemp farmers, at least one, if not 2. So I think we're getting a nice little list of people to come and speak for us.
No,
Covering it.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, when we have to remember that law enforcement is going to be one of your most vocal opponents. And so, it's always nice to have voices from their side who support you. And there are people. A lot of times it's for example, it's not going to be a sheriff, but it'll be in Louisiana, it'll be the Sheriff's Association that lobbies against and that is publicly. And it's often really hard to get a sitting sheriff or chief of police to come out and talk unless they're involved in another organization like LEAP or another. I do have a request for your listeners, and that is, and Scott can get you in touch with me. He has all my contact information. But if you, we're looking at a report looking at decriminalization in the states that still haven't done that. And if you feel like sharing your story in a report as to what an arrest for simple possession of cannabis did to you, maybe you lost a job or you lost an opportunity for education or for housing. And the way we define simple possession is usually under an ounce. So if that is something that you're interested in, I would love to be able to share your story if you're interested. And I do see on a question here from Ina Richards that can you give more details of data collection? So if you don't mind, I know usually you do this later, but since I'm here right now, so normally what I did with data collection was we were looking for the number of people whose top charge was a cannabis possession charge. And I'm not sure exactly how South Carolina works, but for example, even in New Orleans, say, for example, you have narcotics on you or you have a gun on you, your top charge is not going to be cannabis, but they are going to hit you with a state charge for the possession, because that was not the top charge. Like, for example, in our ordinance in New Orleans and Baton Rouge and Shreveport that was only the case if that was your top charge. So if you were committing a crime, you were doing a burglary, you were doing an armed robbery, or you had a gun, or you had narcotics, you were still being charged with that possession charge. But if your only charge, or the highest charge, was cannabis possession, then the officer could just write you a summons. I hope, and Ina, let me know if that answered your question, but I thought it was very important to look at the gender and race and age of the people that were arrested, so that we could see where is the enforcement of prohibition falling on hardest. And so from that point, you can really, there you have talking points beyond just, your beliefs on how you think the laws should be. But then you can look and say, okay, this is, and the fact is that when you see the fact that, like in our case in New Orleans, 86% of the people being arrested for cannabis possession were young African-American men. Then you could look and say, okay, here it is. You are creating distrust in the community, a community that has a traditional fear of law enforcement that goes back, since law enforcement began, and we got to remember that the idea of the police really did not come about until the late 1800s. Like, for example, New York, New Orleans, Charleston, I think that they really didn't even have police departments until the 1880s. Before that, you had civilian patrol groups or different variations, whether they be vigilantes or what have you, but there was not necessarily an organized police force. So the whole idea of modern policing is only about 150 years old. So it is still in its infancy, and it's important to remember that.
And if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was you or somebody else was talking about where policing in America kind of started was after the Civil War. The slaves were now freed, and it was part of the new Jim Crow era, basically.
Well, there's a lot of policing came, at least in America and in the South, came out of the slave patrols from before the Civil War. And so, in the end, slavery was abolished after the war. But then the fact was that if people were sent to a penitentiary, they could still be forced to do free labor. And so then that evolved with Jim Crow, and sadly, they have. I would not use the word evolve. I would think that they have devolved together way too often to be used as a tool to control minority and poor communities. I'd like to, I think we could have a full conversation just on that.
I agree 100%. We talk about that occasionally on the call, and also on the call on our Zoom. I've talked a number of times about how back in December 2019, Charleston police announced that they were going to de-emphasize marijuana arrests in the city because they had a 600-bed prison that had 1,800 prisoners in it. I just recently saw some newer statistics from I think it was about 18 months running through 2020 and about half of 2021, and it mentioned, and I don't have the article in front of me, that Charleston, being a 21.7% Black population, had 71% of the simple marijuana possession arrests during that period.
Well, I personally think, sorry, my video went out for a sec. I personally think that's a great starting point right there to build a relationship with some council members and say, okay, what did the arrest data look like in the 2 years before that? And what's it look like since then? And then at that point, if you have friendly council members, they can start to apply. If the data doesn't show that much of a difference, you can really look and start having them apply pressure to the chief of police to say, well, we told you to de-emphasize this, and why are we not seeing any arrest numbers going down? What can we do? What are you willing to do as an elected official to help? And at that point, then you need to be talking about the long-term consequences of what a possession charge does to people. I mean, besides locking them up, a lot of times they're going to get you into a diversion program so that it doesn't go into your record. That can cost you thousands of dollars. You may have to go take your analysis every week. You may not have the ability to get a job, housing, getting an education loan, getting a security clearance. You could lose professional licenses. There's so many consequences to a possession charge that go way beyond just going into jail or having to go to court, which is traumatic enough. And if you have to sit in jail for 2 or 3 days before you get bonded out, then the fact is you are in with interesting hardcore criminals or more hardened criminals, and the chances are you may be going into a finishing school for crime and not something that to be punished for a crime that you may or may not have committed. So, and again, Ina was just saying she wanted to check the data in upstate and finding a way to decriminalize. Well, I would recognize that this would be probably a process that's going to take a while. But once again, if you have a friendly relationship with maybe a state representative, ask a state representative to be able to provide that data. Because one of the things that we've been looking at decrim across the country is a lot of times there's no central repository for statewide data on that. And so, I mean, it can be a challenge, and it would be could be construed as an overwhelming challenge for an individual or a small group with a limited budget such as yourself. But if that information request is coming from a state representative, then I think you may be able to they may be able to have a better way to leverage that data than you can. Or, the flip side is maybe you make a freedom of information request and they do what we like to call a data dump. And, all of a sudden you'll get 1,000 pages worth of data. It's like, okay, well, here you go. It's all in there. And then you got to go through 1,000 pages to look for that data, which could take you 6 months, could take you a year. So that's why I really highly recommend building relationships with elected officials. I think that's
I like that a lot, because what I'm looking at here at the moment is I'm going to share this link real quick. Charleston Police actually share their data on a website.
okay.
But as you said, then you've got to kind of go through it, figure out what you're looking for, find the data that you're looking for. I haven't been in here a whole lot, so I don't know. But as a flip example, a small town near me, Folly Beach, I wanted to get their arrest data. I thought we'd work on a decrim there because it's just such a small town and be a smaller signature target for petitions. And I requested 3 years of arrest data. They then told me, okay, it's going to cost you this amount of money to give you that data. And then when they finally did give it to me, they only gave me 8 months worth. They said, oh, we changed systems partway through back in such and such a date. So we don't have any of that data anymore from the first 2 years and 4 months that you were looking for, but you paid for it. So I found that kind of interesting. It depends on the municipality, on whether they're going to be through a FOIA type request, Freedom of Information Act request, give you that data, or like Charleston Police, there's data right on a website. I think they just need to be able to know how to explore it.
But it's it's that kind of data should not something you should be fearful of. It's something that you can use as a tool, just like you would a screwdriver or a hammer. And I think you would be surprised if you use the right language.
What I'm almost wondering, since it is, I don't know if they call it work product. I want a copy of Tom Davis's notebook that he was using today at the debates. That's got some good data in it. I don't know how I could FOIA that and get a copy of his notebook. That would be an excellent tool to have on hand.
I got to meet Senator Davis about 4 years ago at a conference in Washington, D.C. for Americans for Safe Access. And he really, really impressed me. He's a very sharp gentleman, and he's very passionate about this subject. I think he has a decent chance on getting that legislation through. I mean, the very fact that he got it to the floor is impressive, and he's well versed.
He is well versed, and you know, a lot of the data that he's sharing, I think, would be beneficial to decrim. Although, and that's why I say I'd like to see his notebook, his binder. But he's very clear. He does not want anybody in the legislature or South Carolinians to get confused. He does not want to move anything more than medical marijuana forward.
Well,
he might not share his notebook with me.
Well, I tell you what, when you look at stuff for medical, the Americans for Safe Access have a lot of great data on their website. NPP does as well. Those data are all public facing. And so, you know, I recommend utilizing those. Listen, I think Senator Davis crafted a bill and has had to let that bill evolve over the last 18 months to the point of what bill stands the best chance of passage. And
absolutely.
I know, for example, we're working with my Common Sense NOLA in Louisiana. At a certain point, I had to take a very backseat on our medical program and being a public advocate for it. We certainly talked about it on the radio station. I wrote some articles about it, but because I was such a vocal advocate for adult use and for decriminalization, that was something that was causing blowback at the Capitol. So I had to kind of put my own pride aside for a second and recognize that I could help further that cause by making sure that they had the kind of witnesses that they wanted. I remember, I guess it was 2016, 2017, the sessions all kind of blend together, but we had a committee hearing the previous year, and we had people coming in jeans and t-shirts. And I'll never forget a really sweet lady, super sweet lady with a very good story that would have made for a fantastic testimony, but shows up in a Denver 420 shirt and at the Capitol. And, you know, I pulled her aside afterwards and we went and had a cup of coffee, and I said, well, listen, you know, everybody has their right to come and speak their mind. That's America. And I said, but the question you have to ask yourself is, A, you always focus on the legislation at hand that day. Okay. And then B, if you're there to help that win and get that legislation passed, you have to focus in on just what is in that legislation. That is not the time to be testifying for a bill that you would talk about other things that you would want to see. You know, as an activist, it's your job to find legislators that will sponsor bills that represent what you believe in, and then you get to go in those days and testify and show support for those bills. But you know, I so often, at least in those first couple of years, we saw people who really meant well and really wanted to see a medical program, but they couldn't help but go off script and talk about other things. And that just kind of all of a sudden that fit into every fear that the people that were teetering on voting for or against something, that played into their fears and said, oh, this is just a cover for, they want everything to be Colorado-esque. I mean, we've seen.
And I'm sure that the medical advocates in South Carolina aren't really pleased that our our upcoming press conference is going to be more decrim focused. Because even if Tom Davis's bill does move forward, it's still going to probably be languishing in the House by February 9th. I don't think they're going to do like Mississippi and turn it around and send it right back approved already.
Well, I think you have to remember when it comes to Mississippi, and congratulations to the Magnolia State. We had the House and Senate voted on the concurrence. The bill goes to the governor's desk. But, Mississippi, or at least up until this point, had the option of a ballot initiative process. We don't have that in Louisiana. Y'all don't have it in South Carolina. That's a huge difference. Because you could look and say, okay, 74% of the voters voted for this. They were organized. It took millions of dollars to run that campaign for Initiative 65. It was a lot of organization. It was a lot of hard work. And the tough thing is so often these things, these things take, they take a lot of money. One of the things that finally hit me as I started to lobby more and more at the Capitol was, it's great to have a lobby day. It's great to have moments at the Capitol, but at the same time, you need people at the Capitol at least a couple times a week, and get to meet the people. Once they see you in that, like for us in Louisiana, it was the Administration of Criminal Justice. That's where pretty much most of the non-medical cannabis bills went to, health and welfare for medical bills. Once they start seeing you there, even opponents will engage you and start talking with you. I befriended our sergeant at arms, who's a super nice guy. And he would sit there several times over the years. I'd say, oh, I'm really trying to get in touch with Representative so-and-so. Oh, well, he likes this coffee shop down the street. Oh, which one? There you go. Not that I told you that, but there you go. And then, finding out what is the coffee house? What is the little restaurant that they like to run to and go grab lunch at? The cafeteria in the Capitol is a great place to meet people and, slowly but surely win hearts and minds.
I guess I'm going to have to start spending a lot more time in Columbia. I've never done that. I mean, our press conference will be my first opportunity to visit the State House.
Well, it's several hours away for y'all, right? About 3 hours away?
About 2 hours, yep. Actually, a pretty solid 2 hours for me.
But I mean, that's 2 hours there, 2 hours back. It certainly has its challenges, but at the same time, it's amazing just what personal touch does with this. And politicians like to shake hands and hug babies and all that good stuff, but most of them, except for the people that will never ever, and you pretty quickly figure out who the never evers are. But then again, that representative that I talked about earlier today, I thought he was a never ever. And it took 5 years. But now we got him, sponsoring really, really great medical cannabis bills. So,
wow. Now, that's why I want to quick address Ina's question of we think McMaster will sign. Probably any time before when Joe Cunningham announced his candidacy for governor and his pro-marijuana policy for full recreational. I probably would have said, no, McMaster won't sign it. But being it's an election cycle, an election year, and at least 3 of the Democratic candidates for governor are pro-cannabis to some extent. And after the Cunningham announcement, McMaster did make some sort of comment about, I don't want to misquote it because I don't remember what it was, but he made some sort of comment that made me feel his position on medical may be evolving, even if it's only evolving to garner votes or not lose votes. in November of this year?
Josh shot me a question. I'll give him an answer for. He asked me, how did I support my advocating in the beginning? I worked at the world famous Tipitina's, which is a fantastic live music club in New Orleans. It's been around since 1978. And I worked my way up to being the head bartender. And bartending allowed me to work nights and weekends to pay my mortgage. And then I was able to fully move forward on my advocacy during the day. And in fact, not only did they like it, they loved it, and really showed me a lot of love and support for the work that I did. One of the things and one of the tools that we did on our decrim ordinance in 2016 was we got artists, we got musicians, to get in and support the ordinance. And that by itself brought in press, including from a local music magazine, which normally doesn't cover politics. They had to cover the story, the fact that musicians were getting behind this move. So Josh, I hope that answers your question. It certainly was challenging because our session, kind of the height of the session, is during April and May, which is the height of the tourism season here, and right during the middle of Jazz Fest. And at Tipitina's, in that 2-week period during Jazz Fest, we would do 32 shows. A lot of times I'd be working until 5, 6 in the morning. I would go home, take a shower, put on my suit, drive an hour and 45 minutes to the Capitol. Just spend all day at the Capitol, drive back, go home, take another shower, put on shorts and a t-shirt and go work all night again. I don't recommend it, but I did it for many years, and but I mean, I was lucky. I'd been a hospitality worker off and on for, well, gosh, now almost 30 years. So when I left public service, I recognized that I wanted to go do other things, but I still had to pay my bills. So I went back to the hospitality industry and was able to do both. So I hope, Josh, that answers your question.
Bear with me a minute. Somebody sent me a private question, and I just got to kind of double check for an answer for them.
Sure. So, listen, it's really been fun getting on this call with y'all, and I hope everybody enjoyed this and got something out of it. And we will be moving cannabis policy forward in the South. I think that's a huge victory for Mississippi today. I think that's a huge victory for their patients. So now we're down to 13 states. Well, obviously once their governor signs it, but we have full faith that he will, or at least not sign it and let it become law. So it's, and hopefully South Carolina will be able to get a program off the air, and then it'll be 12 states. Georgia has a long way to go. There's so many of the southern states that don't really have programs, but slowly but surely we will move forward. And don't ever give up the faith, y'all. Keep working hard at it, and and remember, like I said, it's a marathon, and it's going to be a marathon in all of our communities. But we are what is that famous Dr. King statement? The arch of the universe bends towards righteousness. At least that's the general idea. And slowly but surely, history is on our side. We are fighting the good fight. And okay, Josh just asked one, would you recommend a user get involved, or would they be looking for trouble? Oh, you're just talking about a cannabis consumer? Absolutely, but I don't think that you at the same time, you don't need to advertise the fact that you are a consumer. That's a personal question that really you're never going to. Here's a great thing, and And years ago, one of the best pieces of advice I got and was able to implement, I was testifying at a committee hearing on medical, it was 2016, I think, and a legislator asked me where I stood on adult use. And I kind of knew that once I saw who was getting ready to ask a question, I kind of figured where it was going. And my response was, well, sir, I'm not familiar with any adult use legislation that's pending in front of the legislature right now. I would certainly have to look at that legislation to see if I would support something like that. But I came here today prepared to talk about Bill XYZ and why I support it. And I kind of really shut that down. And it's just really just about staying on topic. So I don't know if that really answers the question, Josh, but no. Now,
It may not answer it for Josh necessarily, but I think that's something I'm going to have to remind myself of. So I take that advice to heart. Is don't let them sidetrack me if I'm there to talk about some specific. As much as I believe in full recreational adult use, don't get me started. Don't let them get me started on it in that particular circumstance.
in those kind of cases, that's what they want you to do because you're playing into their game there. So
now on another side of it, I do want to say that kind of decision is definitely more of a personal decision because if you get vocal about your cannabis support, there could possibly be other repercussions. A good example is when I went to the first meeting to talk about starting Low Country NORML back in 2016. The person that was at that meeting that we thought would be the best fit for the executive director apparently went home excited about it and started talking about it and telling his friends about it and some of his coworkers about it. And apparently it got to his boss at work, and his boss at work says, hey, if you want to keep your job, you're not going to get involved in that. And so next thing I know, I'm getting a call, and I thought I'd just be like, some background guy or whatever. And that's how I got here. But yeah, so there can be additional repercussions.
There can be consequences, Scott. When I beginning of the pandemic, I was obviously looking for different things as a hospitality worker. Everything in New Orleans was shut down for quite a long time. And as I went through the application process of getting back into different things, I got through several job interviews who, they looked and said, well, when we Google you, this is what we see. And then all three times it happened, they said, we wholeheartedly support what you're doing, and we recognize that you're right. But. So, I mean, there can be consequences to advocacy. Like I said, decrim was is one of my passions, and always will be, to keep people out of the criminal justice system for this plan. But I was lucky enough to be in a job where it was celebrated, and I did not have consequences. But when I tried to go into whatever you want to call it, the straight world, and once again, Louisiana, like South Carolina, is a very conservative state. I did get some blowback from that, but and you also have to, I've never been into political theater. So, for instance, I was asked to speak at a jazz funeral for Prohibition in New Orleans. And I actually brought a former assistant district attorney with me, and we were going to speak to the 50 or so people gathered. They were gathered on, if you know New Orleans, Bourbon Street and Canal, one of the big intersections in town. And people were pretty freely consuming. And I looked at the organizer, and I said, I'm sorry, but I brought a former assistant DA here. I said, I cannot be really a part of this. This is not what I want on the 6 o'clock news, is a pile of smoke coming out in front of me speaking in front of a crowd. Now, I recognize that some people like political theater. I just don't find that it actually is a good instrument for legislative change. It'll make you feel good, but and that's why I was saying earlier, that's why you know, several times we got our group together and we went and cleaned up a park, you know. That's the kind of that, but that's just where we were coming from. Voter registration drives is another great way to get a lot of great press for your organization, and at the same time, and you know, there's groups like the Cannabis Voter Project and Headcount. You know, Headcount will really help you do that and make it super easy, and sometimes even give you volunteers to work with you that know how to do it really well. So, I mean, you know, I think there's a lot of ways that you can be seen in your community as working for the good of the community and still be working towards your end goals too. So, I see we're pretty much kind of running out of time, aren't we, Scott?
I would normally have said yes a couple of weeks ago, but we got a suggestion from one of our listeners a couple of weeks back, or a week or so ago, that said, hey, instead of ending right at 8 o'clock after an hour, why don't we just kind of hang out and introduce each other or chit chat or whatever? And so our meetings are now kind of open ended. I think last week we were on till about 8:30. So yeah, they're kind of open ended now. And so my thought would be, at this point, if somebody hasn't asked a question in chat or whatever and would like to open up their mic and ask you a question, Kevin, or me a question, or I'm sure some of you have some thoughts on the hearings today in the Senate. We just kind of open things up and let folks chat. So you're not obligated to stick around with us and hear our after meeting chat if you don't wish to, Kevin, but you know you're always welcome to come back every Wednesday night. We're going to be here. I say that as I'm thinking about Wednesday the 9th. I'm going to have to get back from our lobby day, and hopefully I'll be back in time and get on here by 7 o'clock on the 9th.
I tell you what,
either
Scott,
way, my hope is we'll do it. Even if I'm late, we'll get back and we'll run it.
I can stay on a few more minutes. I need to eat dinner. I've been at my desk working with Mississippi and a number of other projects all day. So I am going to want to get something to eat. But if anybody has any questions, I'll gladly answer them.
Appreciate that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Kevin, I just want to say thank you. I learned a lot. I live in Columbia, and I'm really looking for different ways to get involved and, you know, to help the cause. And you taught me a lot, you know, and I just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm always willing to share my experiences, because I've certainly scraped my knees enough times over the last 10 years. And if I can help other people avoid some of the pitfalls I did, I'm always willing to do that.
I got a lot to talk about on the medical bill, but that probably take an hour. But I'll let anyone else ask Kevin a question if they have anything to ask him.
All right, I'm going to kind of guess that most of the questions have been asked, and I don't want to keep you from supper. I know I get hangry. I'm one of them kind of people. So I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you were able to make it this week. And I'm hoping you'll come back some other week, maybe tell us what's going on, you know, with some of the other the bills. We did actually learn a little bit about the Mississippi bill today from Tom Davis, talking about how they have about 24 qualifying conditions versus his 12. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for coming and being with us tonight, definitely, and it's an open invitation to come back anytime.
Absolutely, Scott. I will, and thank you for the people that engaged on the chat. And thanks, Josh, for the question. And I most certainly will be back here. Next couple of weeks are kind of booked for me, but as we progress, obviously this is something y'all do every week. So Scott and I'll get together and work on getting back on here. Thanks again.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to chat a little bit about our as you can see behind me, new signs. Let me actually get Tom Davis off the wall here. Come on down, Tom. I had to hang it up because he was sharing it today, and I had to kind of share it back on his page amongst all of our other signs. So let me get out of the way a second. These will be our lobby signs, rally day signs for, actually we're calling it a press conference. And we've gotten a nice batch of them. As a matter of fact, I want to mention, let me do a little plug here. 420 Print Media. 420 Print Media is a new South Carolina NORML sponsor. They were very generous with the signs that they've provided for us. We paid a little bit, but they covered a lot of it. We've got bunches of signs, enough to handle whoever shows up on the 9th, and probably extras for down the road if we need them for another time. What we did ask them to do, and they did for us, they did two-sided signs. So on the one side of all of the signs is South Carolina NORML's basic information, our logo, a chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, working to reform marijuana laws, and our website. And then the opposite side is a mix of these 5 other signs that we have. Again, you'll see most of them are pretty much decriminalization focused. Patients are not criminals, still to me makes that kind of decrim, but it is probably medical a little. So anyway, I wanted to thank the folks at 420 Print Media. And believe it or not, I think if you have some printing needs for your cannabis-based business, contact me. I'll hook you up with them, and they will provide a 20% print discount for you. They did some other stuff, some little two-sided postcards that we'll be able to pass around if anybody wants. One of the comments on one of the posts that I did about the sign, somebody goes, "Oh, how do I get one to put out in my yard?" They are a single layer, so they're not like the corrugated signs. I think they'd be better fit in a window. But my comment to them was, come on out on February 9th, be there by 8:45, hold the sign for us. And when we're done with the press conference, you can take that sign home with you and put it in your window, put it in your car, put it out front, however you want to use it. You're welcome to take those signs home, spread the word about South Carolina NORML around your community. So if you do see some of those posts on our social media about coming out and holding signs, I'm going to request that please share those within your community. See how many people we can get to show up on a Wednesday morning, a weekday morning. I've heard a couple of people going, "Oh, it's a weekday, I can't go," but that's when the legislators are there. We have to go when the legislators are going to be there. We can't kind of do it on the weekend. We are, as of tonight, 2 weeks away. We are doing some finalizing on our speaker list, our guest list. I'm going to kind of pull it up from the background here. I think I have it hidden. There it is. And I don't want to be too forthcoming at the moment, only because we'll be reconfirming all of our speakers probably about a week out. We'll be making a press release to the media sources targeted to let them know next Thursday. So after our Wednesday meeting, we will be sending out on Thursday morning a press release to all the media sources about our upcoming press conference on, did I say the 7th? No, that's the 3rd, something like that. We'll send it out on the 3rd. We're going to do a follow-up on the 7th to the media sources as well. And by that time, we should have a good confirmation on all of our speakers. I was surprised because I've had a couple of no's kind of change around to yes. I invited a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like a dozen people to speak. Currently, we have 1 no and 2 that have not responded yet. All the rest are yeses. I will be calling them all tentative yeses at the moment until I kind of reconfirm everybody just a few days before the press release. But as I was talking a little bit earlier with Kevin and getting earlier in our Zoom, we do have the ACLU of South Carolina representative for civil rights, for civil liberties type thing. We have somebody speaking from the Americans for Prosperity. A representative of LEAP is tentatively scheduled. LEAP is Law Enforcement Action Partnership, formerly Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. A candidate for governor. I think it's 2 farmers, hemp farmers, 2 veterans, one of them a hemp farmer, and a researcher. I'll be sharing more information as I get those confirmations coming through the week. There's still a couple of them, like I said, they've said yes, but I want to be certain, make sure everything's confirmed before we go and mention any of that to the public. I've got to check another quick note here. Okay. I think that's my biggest news. Oh, another cool thing I want to share with you real quick, just because I thought it was fun. Maintain social distancing. Stay at least 4 plants apart. Let's see if I can turn that on. I thought that was funny, and actually, there's a flip side to that on a. Oh, there it is, on a little card. Stay 24 bongs apart. That one I kind of like. I'd like to have a collection of 24 bongs somewhere. But anyway, our new print media sponsor has been very helpful if you have any print needs. All right. I don't think there's anything else I needed to cover, so I'm more than willing to open it up for any other questions that you guys have about the upcoming press conference. Things are actually surprisingly coming together, I think, pretty well on it. I mentioned to some of my staff some of my board the other day, I think we got 3 confirmations from a couple of the people asked in a matter of a day or two. And all of a sudden the list kind of like grew substantially. And then I got a no turned around to yes earlier today. So I'm kind of excited. I think we're going to have a good turnout. We're going to have a pretty good representation. I am going to be following up with folks, like I say, in the next week and just sort of touching base, make sure we're all on the same page. And weather looks not too bad. I just saw an email come in for an event that I was not going to go to on Saturday. It was one of those RSVP by the end of the day. And I looked at the weather for Saturday. I went, I'm not going. That's going to be freaking cold. And I happened to see, as we were chatting here today, a notification come in that's actually been canceled. So I don't know if it's just for weather or what, but thankfully on the 9th, it looks like pretty good weather. I believe we're going to be in the mid 60s, low overnight in the 40s. So like as we get up there in the morning, it's probably going to be, 50 or so degrees. Part of the reason why I chose to hold it inside the lobby instead of outside, I saw somebody shared a live stream of I think it must have been the Palmetto Family Council's press conference there today. I think that's what I decided. Let me look real quick. I'm seeing some notes in. Kevin's already kind of scooted out of the call, Kyle. What I would suggest, maybe he does. I reached out to him originally through Facebook. So Kevin Caldwell on Facebook. You'll recognize the picture as the picture he used earlier, as we used in the promo. And that would probably be the best way. Or actually, I'm going to check MPP's site real quick. because I think he may be on their staff list by now. There he is. All right. Let's see if he has his own page. I'm going to drop his profile here in the chat from MPP. And I would assume, actually, I don't see a contact link on that page, so I'm going to go back one. Yeah, I don't see a contact link for him, so I'd suggest to try and reach out on Facebook at the moment. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to starting. Yeah, I'm glad that he was placed in this position at MPP. We were talking, I see it mentioned that we started talking earlier this past summer. And so I was trying to start utilizing him as a resource. And since he's now been named as the regional manager for this area by MPP and given that position hired by them, it will facilitate our ability to work together and hopefully take advantage of his background in decrim in Louisiana. So I'm excited to start doing more of that. He's got me thinking, how do we change this Zoom meeting to a weekly radio show? Well, we might have to start finding, I might have to start reaching out to some of the local radios and see if there's a way to kind of do that. I think before we do that, though, I really need to be able to get better at inviting guests on here. We have had some scattered out throughout the past year and a half we've been doing it, but we don't have weekly guests, and I think that would probably be best if we could have a regular guest most weeks. Maybe not all, but most. And of course, can't be all because we do our well, to be a radio show, we wouldn't be doing our monthly meetings on a radio show, but they are part of our cannabis conversation now.
Scott, I was actually thinking about approaching my buddy that owns a radio station, the talk station here in Columbia, and discussing the possibility of doing like an hour Sunday show on, reform and changing the laws and, stuff like that. Would you be interested in co-hosting something like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
the more we can speak out to the community, I'd be all for it.
I'll ask him about that.
All right. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and he even acknowledged it's not going to be an easy fight here in South Carolina. It's not going to be an easy battle. I as I sort of alluded earlier, I feel a little apprehensive, maybe, on the decision to want to focus on decrim at this point, and I say that hesitantly. Because I don't want, I'm not hesitant. I'm thinking maybe I should be more hesitant on it. But my attitude is just, hell with it. They know it's coming. It's their biggest fear is that, decrim's going to follow medical, and it's just going to happen. Am I a little early in the game to start pushing decrim when we haven't gotten a medical bill through? Some might say yes, and that's where my hesitancy comes. Some might say yes, but it needs to be done, and there's no time like the present to start now. I don't know how many of you got an opportunity to see it, but I had a chance to be interviewed by Live 5 News yesterday. I guess the affiliate is as well with WIS TV, because I see my comments on a WIS TV article. But it was kind of exciting to see myself on TV last night. Yeah.
I wish they would have shown more of the interview.
I wish they would have too, because of course you could actually see the entire interview with them. That I set up a little camera. Apparently, I chopped my head off for the whole
Yeah,
time.
that's the one I watched. I watched both of them.
Did you watch my 20-minute on our YouTube channel then?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I really. They asked a lot of good questions. She asked a lot of good questions. There was a lot of good information that we were kind of there to share. And unfortunately, I think they used 4 sentences, if that, something like that. But you'll see that in the WIS article that I shared. That probably has about a bulk of what they put in. Actually, I think it might have a couple more words than they actually used in the TV clip. But as I said to my wife, I've been in Charleston since 2016. I've been on television more here than I ever was in Pennsylvania in my 60 years of living in there. A little shy of 60 years up there. But anyway, and of course my mother went, "What'd you do?" "Mom, it's not a bad thing. I'm not in trouble." But yeah, when I told my mother one time I was on TV, like, "What'd you do?" "Talked about marijuana, Mom. That's what we do." So, and my mom, she's 96. Use CBD. Gotta love her. All right, let me kind of peek anything else. I don't see anything in chat. I don't have a whole lot to talk about coming up until the press conference. Like I mentioned, I talked, I think, most of what I have. I'm excited. I do want to real quick check a text message I got just as the meeting was starting. Our deputy director, Kristen, messaged me right before 7 o'clock, says she will be missing the 7 o'clock meeting, but wanted to let me know that. I plan to have contacted and scheduled with most, if not all, the legislators by the end of day Friday. So she's been working on that through the day today and yesterday. She's reaching out to our legislators to schedule for anybody who has signed up to participate with us on our lobby day. You're not required to sign up for lobby day if you want to just come out for the press conference in the morning and hold a sign and show your support. That's only if you really want to join us and go in and talk specifically to your legislator. I will share that link again real quick.
Scott, can we, not tonight, obviously, but before we do this, can we kind of go over how we need to talk to them? And because I'm still learning. So, how do we need to approach them? What we're going to say.
Absolutely. And I think probably what we'll do next week is we will focus primarily on that. My goal, and I'll share it with you all right now, just so you sort of have an idea of where I'm hoping to be going with this. Yeah, Kyle actually commented echoed your comment. But for the most part, the plan is, as we go in to speak to each of the legislators, you will have 2 of our board members with us. It's either going to be myself and our treasurer, Michael Knight, or if you're being accompanied by our deputy director and our secretary, that's Kristen Mumert and Vaughn Postema. I pronounced it right, I think. And our intention is most of these meetings are going to be 5 or 10 minutes. They're not really going to be too long. I mentioned to Kristen in scheduling to figure that, we could probably do 15-minute blocks and be able to probably, depending on how far apart offices are, because we'll be going between a couple of buildings. But the plan is, once we get into a legislator's office, and again, we may not be speaking specifically with that legislator, but with one of their aides, generally we'll be led into an office, take a seat. The plan is at this point that one of our board, whoever, if you're with me, it'll probably be me starting off with a little introduction of who we are and the basic reason on why we're there. And as we go over our little we're not going to say a lot. We'll just basically tell them that we're here to let our legislators know that we support moving marijuana laws forward. We support decriminalization, that we believe that it's a violation of civil rights and civil liberties. I haven't worked it all out, but basically going to let them know that we're here to tell them that as voters, we support moving decriminalization forward. We believe that decriminalization is harm reduction. We'll give them a fact sheet before we leave, but we're going to just do a real quick intro. And at that point, we're going to tell them that we brought one of or a couple of their constituents with us, and we'd like to give them a moment to tell their story. And at that point, we're going to ask, if you're there visiting your legislator with us, for you to tell just a couple of moments, either if you have a story that you want to relate or your reasoning behind your passion for advocating, and take a minute or two. We don't really expect it to be much more than what we call an elevator speech, about a 90-second, what they call getting in the elevator to the next floor up or something. So usually an elevator type speech is real quick, 60 to 90 seconds. And that's kind of what we're hoping that you do. And now I say that, it doesn't seem long, but start writing it out and then practice it in the front of a mirror or something like that. 90 seconds is a long time. It can really seem like a long time, especially when I see on some of these calls, I talk for an hour. I'm like, what the hell did I say all that time? Because 90 seconds to do an elevator speech could be agonizing for me to write sometimes. So if it's me or there's another, if it's just one person or two, we'll let them, have their couple of minutes. If you have more than 90 seconds to say, don't let me stop you. Don't let me dissuade you from saying everything you feel you need to say. But we want to try to keep the meetings relatively brief. And so, like I say, I would probably say something. We would have any constituent say something. We would probably have then the secretary who's with us from our board. If you're with my team, Michael, he may do a follow-up something to say, which I'm figuring that's what we'll kind of do. At that point, we're going to ask if they'll do a group photo with us. We're going to take a group photo. We're going to leave them then with a one sheet, which our Secretary Vaughn and actually Kristen are working on. It's going to be reminiscent of the normal fact sheets. We're sort of using the fact sheets as some of the categories that we're going to start, give a couple little blurbs. We're going to add links to it in a PDF document that will follow up an email to them afterwards so that they can click those links from that one sheet and go and see some of the data and statistics that we're talking about. And leave them if any gift that we're going to be leaving. My plan is, I don't know if I'll have enough for everybody, but we do have 35 or 40 of the emerging clinical applications books to leave. I plan on leaving them hopefully more with opponents than proponents. And if they're already a proponent, I know, like my local house rep, I probably already gave her a book, mind you, but I wouldn't need to leave her one because I already know she supports. And then scoot out of there and try and get to the next appointment. Like I mentioned, Kristen's hopefully going to have everybody scheduled and everything, all the legislators contacted by end of day Friday. So as we talk next Wednesday, I should have a lot better information for you on where offices we're going to go and when. And I will do a little bit better job of laying out our agenda for each visit. Does that work for y'all?
Sounds good.
All right. I am getting real excited about this. Like I said earlier, my first visit to the Capitol. I think we're going to have some impact. I'm going to start working on, like I say, that draft that I need to send out to the as the press release on the 7th and the 3rd and the 7th. Just to make sure that we get plenty of media coverage. I was thrilled when the signs showed up yesterday. I'm thinking, damn, we're ready for the cameras. All we need is people to hold the signs. So again, I'm going to repeat that one more time. If you do happen to see on any of our social media the picture of the signs and me asking for people to come out and just hold signs, share it in your communities, please. Share it in your social media, share it in your circles. It's a Wednesday. It might be tough for a lot of people with daytime jobs, but share it out. The more people we have there holding signs in front of the camera, I think the more impact we'll have. I think it'll be a better, sound, not necessarily sound bite, but it'll be a better clickbait, I guess you would call it, better click rate. So share it out. Let's get this going. I'm going to throw it out there one last time before I kind of wrap it up for the night. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns?
I got a comment.
Yes, sir.
Watching the debate today, I am totally disgusted by what Chief Kill has done in slandering Tom Davis. And I just want to put it out there, call his office. And, if you feel the same way I do, and I'm making this call tomorrow, call the office and let him know, or his staff know, how you feel about him getting involved with politics and slandering Tom Davis's name. And that's all I have to say.
And as we all know, our First Amendment gives us a right to redress our government with our grievances. And I agree, if you do not like what Mark Keel has to say, or the way he says it, or the way he utilizes taxpayer dollars, please reach out and contact SLED and let them know. I do want to point out that being the head of SLED is an appointed position. It is not an elected position. He was appointed there by the governor, which is an elected position, so keep that kind of stuff in mind. This coming election cycle, as we move forward in the election cycle, it is the governor that appoints the head of SLED. And I would assume that if McMaster goes, I would think pretty readily, if we got somebody that was pro-marijuana, they would replace Keel pretty quickly. And that would resolve some of our problems, I would think. We can hope. We can hope. I would love to see him out of there. But again, through the week, I've seen a number of sheriffs, which are generally elected positions. Well, they are elected positions. There've been a number of sheriffs out there stating their anti-marijuana position to the media.
Upstate is ridiculous, and we got a lot of work to do up there.
Yes, the upstate is ridiculous, and that's why I thought it was kind of amusing when I called this one particular police chief, and he said he didn't think it was appropriate to use his office to speak about decriminalization, but there's plenty of sheriffs that have no problem speaking out against medical marijuana or any type of marijuana law reform. So just thought I'd mention that. And remember, whenever you're talking to them, they say to you, anything you say can and will be used against you. So don't talk to police. They don't plan on using anything for you. They're for your benefit. They plan on using it against you. Even the Supreme Court says, do not talk to police. You have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and you have a Fourth Amendment right to decline any unlawful searches and seizures. And you also have a Sixth Amendment right to have an attorney present during questioning. Make sure you exercise those rights. Otherwise, that's all I've got for you tonight, guys. I thank you for coming on, joining me, and hanging out for an hour and 40 minutes. Woohoo! It was great having Kevin Caldwell on and talking about decrim, but it's time to go. So we will see you back here next Wednesday at 7 p.m. We will be talking about our upcoming press conference and lobby day. Don't forget to keep an eye on our Facebook page, our Instagram, and our Twitter. A little bit more on Facebook, but to find our information, don't forget also to visit our website at scnormal.org. And while you're there, scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on the sign up for our newsletter email list. Otherwise, that's all I got for you tonight. Thank you for joining.